World-famous bedtime stories from Mom. Today's story is Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, in a small and peaceful village, there lived a lovely girl. She was always bright and cheerful, yet she had one particular favorite thing, a red hood given to her by her grandmother. This red hood suited her so well that whenever she appeared wearing it, the villagers would all say, "Ah, Little Red Riding Hood is here," and welcomed her warmly. My dear granddaughter, wearing this hood will always keep you healthy and happy," her grandmother had said. Little Red Riding Hood was incredibly happy with this gift filled with her grandmother's love. Since that day she never went anywhere without her hood. The villagers always greeted her with warm smiles, and she would greet the villagers back as she wandered through the village, from the small shops to the wide squares and the beautiful riverbanks. Little Red Riding Hood wandered around the village wearing her hood. One morning, while having breakfast with her mother, "Little Red Riding Hood, your grandmother is feeling a bit unwell today," her mother said. "How about you go and see her?" Little Red Riding Hood loved her grandmother very much. "Yes, I will visit grandmother's house." Her mother handed her a basket and said, "Here are some cake and wine. Grandmother will enjoy them. But be careful, the forest path can be dangerous." Little Red Riding Hood assured her mother not to worry. "Mom, don't worry. I'll safely return from grandmother's house," she replied. Holding the basket, she took to the forest path leading to her grandmother's house. Admiring the beautiful flowers along the way, Little Red Riding Hood decided to gather a bouquet for her grandmother. "A grandmother will surely be delighted to see these flowers," she murmured to herself. Although the forest was quiet and peaceful, Little Red Riding Hood did not forget her mother's words and remained vigilant. The small forest animals looked at her with curiosity and also greeted her. "Hello, I'm on my way to my grandmother's house." Little Red Riding Hood kindly greeted the animals too. While walking through the forest path, Little Red Riding Hood suddenly encountered a large wolf. The wolf showed interest in the basket she was carrying. "Hey, Little Red Riding Hood. What's in that basket?" the wolf slyly asked. Little Red Riding Hood, thinking the wolf was not scary, naively answered, "Hello, Mr. Wolf. This basket contains cake and wine for my grandmother. She's unwell." The wolf became even more interested upon hearing this. "Really? Where does your grandmother live?" the wolf asked again. Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf about her grandmother's house location. A grandmother's house is deep in the forest. Under a large oak tree, there's a house with a hazelnut fence. The wolf, scheming inside, advised Little Red Riding Hood, "Little Red Riding Hood, don't hurry and look around. The forest is full of beautiful flowers and wonderful scenery. Grandmother would understand even if you're late." Little Red Riding Hood heeded the wolf's words. "Should I? Then I'll pick some more beautiful flowers for grandmother." Naively believing the wolf, she began picking flowers. While Little Red Riding Hood was picking flowers, the wolf sneakily ran off to the grandmother's house. Racing through the forest, the wolf thought about his plan. "If I get to the grandmother's house first," he thought, "I could deceive both the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood." The wolf cunningly devised a way to trick the grandmother into letting him inside. Upon arrival, the wolf imitated Little Red Riding Hood's voice and knocked on the door. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. Please open the door." However, the grandmother recognized the trick. "Who is it? That doesn't sound like my granddaughter," the grandmother cautiously inquired. But the wolf did not give up and tricked the grandmother even more cunningly. Eventually he managed to get inside the house. After startling the grandmother, he quickly devoured her. The wolf then dressed in the grandmother's clothes and lay in bed, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood was in the forest's flower garden, gathering a beautiful bouquet of flowers. "A grandmother will surely be delighted with these flowers," she thought happily as she picked them. She was so engrossed in picking flowers that she lost track of time. While she was busy, the forest animals gathered around her. A little rabbit sniffed the flowers, sniff, sniff, enjoying their scent, and birds sang beautiful songs from the branches above. Little Red Riding Hood truly enjoyed her time with these forest friends. However, time was quickly passing. Little Red Riding Hood realized she needed to head to her grandmother's house. She hurriedly left the flower garden, thinking, "Grandmother must be waiting. I must go now." The wolf, dressed in grandmother's clothes, lay in bed, practicing how to imitate the grandmother while waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. "If I act just like the grandmother," he thought, "Little Red Riding Hood will mistake me for her." The wolf chuckled, pleased with his cunning plan. Then Little Red Riding Hood's voice was heard outside. "Grandmother, I'm here," she called out happily. Imitating the grandmother's voice, the wolf replied, "Pull the latch and come in, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood, without any suspicion, opened the door. At that moment, the wolf was waiting in the grandmother's bed. As Little Red Riding Hood entered, the wolf, pretending to be the grandmother, tried to deceive her. "Come in, my dear granddaughter. Grandmother has been waiting just for you." Little Red Riding Hood hurried into her grandmother's house. She found it odd that the door was open but thought her grandmother was expecting her and loudly called out, "Grandmother, I'm here." But from that moment there was no answer. "Grandmother?" Little Red Riding Hood called again, but the house remained silent. Cautiously stepping inside, Little Red Riding Hood looked around. Everything seemed normal, but she felt something was off. "Grandmother, where are you?" Little Red Riding Hood walked towards the bed with a sense of unease. Standing by the bed, Little Red Riding Hood noticed that her grandmother's appearance seemed different. Her grandmother's face was deeply buried in the blanket and her voice sounded odd. "Grandmother, are you all right?" Little Red Riding Hood asked cautiously. "Grandmother, why are your ears so big?" Little Red Riding Hood asked, pointing out her grandmother's unusually large ears. The wolf, still imitating the grandmother's voice, replied, "The better to hear you with, my dear." Suspicion filled Little Red Riding Hood's eyes. "But why are your hands so big?" The wolf, again imitating the grandmother's voice, answered, "The better to hug you with." "But grandmother, why is your mouth so big?" Little Red Riding Hood asked, growing more suspicious. At that moment, the wolf ceased pretending to be the grandmother and revealed his true form. "The better to eat you with," he shouted, leaping out of the bed towards Little Red Riding Hood. After swallowing Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf, satisfied, began to snore loudly. A hunter passing through the forest heard the strange snoring sound and became curious. "I've never heard such a sound in this forest before," the hunter muttered to himself. He cautiously approached the grandmother's house. Peeking through the window, he saw a large wolf sleeping in the bed, not the grandmother. Oh no, did this wolf eat the grandmother? And to be snoring so loudly. The hunter sensed something was amiss. He tiptoed into the house and approached the wolf. Noticing the wolf's unusually swollen belly, he thought, perhaps the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood are still alive inside. He began to carefully cut open the wolf's belly. As the hunter carefully cut open the wolf's belly to rescue Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother safely, the first to emerge was a surprised Little Red Riding Hood, who blinked in the darkness and exclaimed, "Oh, where am I? It's so dark and damp here." Realizing she had been rescued, she gratefully said to the hunter, "Thank you, Mr. Hunter. I'm so grateful." Next, as the hunter continued to cut more cautiously, he managed to rescue the grandmother as well. "Phew, I can finally breathe again," the grandmother sighed with relief. "Thank you for saving me, young man." Together, the hunter, Little Red Riding Hood, and her grandmother filled the wolf's belly with large stones. "And now this wolf will never trouble us again," said the hunter as they carefully stitched up the wolf's belly with thread and needle. After all was done, they sat together in the grandmother's house, drinking warm tea and recounting the day's events. When the wolf finally woke up, he felt unusually heavy. "Why am I so heavy?" he wondered, confused and trying to stand up. Thirsty, he made his way to the well for a drink but found it difficult to walk due to the heaviness. Upon reaching the well, the weight of the stones made it impossible for him to keep his balance, and he fell into the well as he attempted to drink. "Help me," the wolf cried out in his last moments, but it was too late. The wolf disappeared into the depths of the well. Peace was restored to the grandmother's house. Little Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, and the hunter, after witnessing the wolf's end, returned home relieved. "Our forest is safe once again," they said. "Thank you for saving us from the danger of the wolf, Mr. Hunter," Little Red Riding Hood expressed her gratitude. The grandmother, Little Red Riding Hood, and the hunter remained friends for a long time. They often gathered to drink tea and share stories, dreaming of other adventures in the forest. Little Red Riding Hood, from that day forward, walked through the forest more cautiously, always remembering her grandmother's love and the hunter's bravery, and lived happily ever after. Thank you for listening to the end. Click on the playlist for more stories. Your subscription, likes, and notifications greatly support me.